Powered by Riverside FM.
Welcome to another edition of Unconventional Playbook. Please hit that like and subscribe button. The topic of conversation for the Minnesota Vikings over the last 24, 48 hours has been the play of Sam Darnold, and so it should be. But for the most part, everyone is talking about whether or not the Minnesota Vikings should offer Sam Darnold multi-year contract, franchise tag him, or let him walk to make J.J. McCarthy the starting quarterback in 2025 season. And rightfully so. You know, the topic of conversation should be on Sam Darnold. He is playing lights out through 5 touchdowns against the Atlanta Falcons and Kirk Cousins on Sunday. One of the most enjoyable games that I have ever had the opportunity to watch. My question to UP Nation and Vikings Nation, Skull Nation, whatever nation you come from, trying to figure out, is this something that we've seen before? When people are talking about multi-year deals, I think you gotta be careful on these flash in the pan seasons. And I'm not calling Sam Darnold's season a flash in the pan. This could be something, start of something special for Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings. Who am I? I don't know these things. I'm just asking a hypothetical question to UP Nation out there. Have we seen this before? So I went back and I just looked at a variety of different seasons where what a lot of people don't realize is these type of seasons with quarterbacks have happened a lot and it's common. So more specifically, I started with the Minnesota Vikings. Remember Case Keenum's season back in 2017? Man, Case Keenum was rolling through for 22 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. The Minneapolis Miracle is what they call it, with him and Stephon Diggs beating the Saints in the playoffs. You remember that? Case Keenum was balling out. Case Keenum looked like the guy for that season. I mean, he was slinging the ball all over the place, had the Vikings offense moving up and down the field, and I know Case Keenum, unlike Sam Darnold, was a late-round pick. Sam Darnold was the number 3rd pick overall. I get it. But after that season, the Vikings chose to move on elsewhere and move away from Case Keenum despite taking us to the NFC Championship game. The Vikings moved on. But you would have thought, just like some people are saying about Sam Darnold, you can't let him walk. You can't let him walk. He's going to be a good quarterback for somebody else. I remember correctly that they were saying some of the same things about Case Keenum. And after Case Keenum left the Minnesota Vikings, how did that work out for Case Keenum? Did he ever have a season like he had with the Minnesota Vikings? Was that system? Was that the inconsistency of Case Keenum in terms of things that he had in his toolbox? Was it scheme? Or was it just a flash in the pan type season? You got to start asking yourself about these things, because when you talk about the Minnesota Vikings investing money in Sam Darnold, roughly $35 to $41 million in Sam Darnold, you've got to ask yourself, as a GM, is this something that can sustain itself and continuously happen for Sam Darnold? Or is it a flash in the pan? If you're a GM, you've got to ask yourself these questions. Remember 1999? Jeff George got the Vikings off to an 8-2 season, 10 games, 94.2 passer rating, 23 touchdowns with 12 interceptions. Jeff George was tearing it up. And we all know Jeff George's pedigree. But I remember back in 1999 when Jeff George was lighting it up, there was talk that he may be the new face of the Minnesota Vikings and be our new franchise quarterback. After that great season with the Minnesota Vikings, how did that work out for Jeff George? Arguably, almost defeated the greatest show on turf. The Rams defeated the Vikings 49-37 in the playoffs. And one of the greatest games that I've ever watched, even though we came up short, Jeff George was slinging it. But after he left the Minnesota Vikings, what essentially happened to Jeff George? Was it scheme, flash in the pan? What was it? All I know is that Jeff George didn't have the season afterwards that he did with the Minnesota Vikings. Just couldn't replicate it. One of my favorite seasons of all time was the Randy Moss, Chris Carter, Jake Reed connection with Randall Cunningham. Remember that season? Randall Cunningham lit it up. MVP type season, slinging the ball everywhere, 3 deep connection, Robert Smith in the backfield, Jake Reed in the slot, Chris Carter on the outside, Randy Moss running the fly. That's one of the best seasons in Minnesota Viking history. Randall Cunningham was one of my favorite quarterbacks back in the day. I was happy to see him come to the Minnesota Vikings, lit it up. You guys remember that season, right, UP Nation? What happened to Randall Cunningham and that connection after that season? After the going to Miami season. Remember that? Going to Miami. After that season, Randall Cunningham came back, couldn't replicate what he did the season before, and actually pulled himself out of a game the following season because he was not playing well. It felt like he was hurting the team. Was that dynamic season with the Minnesota Vikings in 3 deep a flash in the pan? I know that Randall Cunningham was a lot older. He had played some years with the Eagles. So he wasn't spry. He wasn't a fresh young body anymore, but he still could play. He could ball. He had proved that the year before. What happened the following season? Couldn't replicate that. Was that a flash in the pan season for Randall Cunningham? You guys kind of see where I'm going with this. This type of stuff happens all the time, and we tend to forget. Can't leave off the list Brett Favre. When Brett Favre came from the Jets, a lot of people think he came from the Packers, but he went to the Packers to the Jets. From the Jets to the Vikings. And I love the signing because it aggravated Green Bay Packer fans. It aggravated them tremendously. So it tickles me inside when I think about that season. 2 sweeps of the Green Bay Packers. Beat them in Lambeau, beat them in Minneapolis, beat them bad. Brett Favre showed out with a young Aaron Rodgers at quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. Minnesota Vikings, of course, come up short. Bounty Gate. New Orleans Saints fall short of going to the Super Bowl. Following season, Brett Favre comes back. We had to make another journey down to Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Brett Favre ends up coming back. Somehow, some way, we could not replicate the season before. UP Nation, you see where I'm going with this? Let's look at it outside the Minnesota Vikings. Let's look at Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco with the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns is one of the most destitute franchises, lost, just a plethora of just misjudgments, bad drafts, bad free agents, bad general managers, bad coaches, blah, 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 Cleveland Browns. You name it, the Cleveland Browns have done it. Joe Flacco comes in to give a little bit of relief from Deshaun Watson, who was injured, who gave a little bit of relief from Baker Mayfield, who was jettisoned out of Cleveland. Joe Flacco comes in, plays balls out pretty much the whole season, goes to the playoffs, loses in the playoffs, doesn't play very well, but he gets them to the playoffs, loses to the Texans. They don't even offer him a contract to come back to the Cleveland Browns, but he goes to the Colts, and you all saw what Joe Flacco looked like this season. couldn't replicate his level of play and what he did in Cleveland? Flash in the pan last year? Or is it just a situation where he's just getting too old? And I know when you look at Sam Darnold is 27 years old. And so he is just hitting his peak. So a lot of the guys and the comparisons that I've talked about, they're older guys. Randall Cunningham, Brett Favre. Older guys. Guys that were close to falling off a cliff. But I bring up these points because I think it's valid. Sometimes you can have these great seasons, and before you sign these quarterbacks to long-term deals, you got to get a better, longer look. And I think that's what the Minnesota Vikings are faced with right now, trying to get a better, longer look. I think when it comes to Sam Darnold, these last 4 games are crucial. UP Nation, Minnesota Vikings Nation, you've been watching this team long enough to know that we always have these predicaments. No matter how good our season is, there's always a couple of games that we need. There's always a couple of games that we need to have. These 4 games that we have are going to be a test for Sam Darnold. Is it the same old, same old? Is it the Brett Favre's, the Randall Cunninghams, the Case Keenums, kind of the same old, where you get good quarterback play, and then somehow, some way we fall short and we don't get over the hump? Well, this is what the next 4 games are going to kind of answer us. I think all of the talk about whether or not you but re-sign Sam Darnold, it's going to come to the forefront in these 4 games. Now, I don't want to put everything on his shoulders in terms of wins and losses. The NFL, football is a team game. Defense got to play well, like KOC talks about all the time. You got to be good in all 3 phases. It's not about one phase, but the optics of it. The optics. Sam Darnold's got to play well. Can't regress these next 4 games. Can't regress in the playoffs. Once the Vikings get to the playoffs, no matter who we play, he's got to play well. He can't be the Sam Darnold that threw 5 interceptions in 2 games in the middle of the season. Can't be that. If he is the future, and you're going to put J.J. McCarthy on the shelf for a couple of years to sign Sam Darnold to a multi-year contract, it's got to show itself in the next 4 games. Right, UP Nation? Skull Nation, you guys are with me, right? Like, he can't regress. That would be detrimental, but it will also answer a lot of questions on whether or not Sam Darnold should stay with the Minnesota Vikings. It is that clear. And again, some of the comparisons, I know I'm going to get some kickback about the majority of the guys that I mentioned were old guys and they were ready for retirement, but it shows you not how easy, but it shows you how common these flash in the pan seasons can be. And when you're sitting in the seat of a general manager or a head coach, this is where you really earn your money. You've got to know your craft. You've got to know what you're doing, and you've got to be able to make the hard decisions. So when I hear on talk shows and people write into me and talk to me about whether or not we should bring Sam Darnold back to the Minnesota Vikings, my first comment is, we got to let this thing play out. But I know where I'm leaning right now. It is paramount that we get a franchise quarterback that can be here for years, that we can mold, that has all the tools and the intelligence and knows how to be a leader of men and has that winning DNA. And I think that's J.J. McCarthy. But who am I? I could be wrong, man. Let's just see where we are when we get to where we are and see how this thing plays out with Sam Darnold. My only thing is don't rush to a decision. Don't get enamored with these flash in the pan seasons. Enjoy it. Minnesota Viking fans, UP Nation, I'm enjoying it. But in terms of putting that pen to paper and talking about a multi-year contract, settle down. Let's let this thing play out. You don't want to make a rash decision. Ask the Atlanta Falcons about making a rash decision. We know where we have been for the last 6 years. We do not want to go back there, UP Nation. We do not want to go back there. Please hit that like and subscribe button. I appreciate you when I appreciate you. I love it. Thanks for supporting the show. We will make sure to see you when I see you. Put your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about what the Minnesota Vikings should do with Sam Darnold? LaTrey, take us home, man.
I don't know who I am. Can I say I'm a man? Am I losing my mind? Am I wasting my time? Do I know who I am?